I gotta show you just. I just filmed this.
Oh, there it is. There he is.
Look, there he is.
There he is.
Yeah, in his Corvette.
Convertible Corvette.
Yeah. Okay, I literally.
Right.
No. His Corvette would be perfect. So. No, his Corvette is he's got a 62 and it's absolutely perfect. There he is. Frank, that's amazing. Frank, now is it some sort of almost like Yana or Jhana to come to the conclusion where you're able to run things to their ultimate conclusion and realize how silly it is to pursue anything? No. But it's just,
Do you know what this one is?
Oh my goodness.
what is that, Gene?
59. Dodge or Chevy?
I was just like, wow, that thing.
Yeah. Either 59 or 60 or 61, I think.
I have
Yeah.
to post it on Facebook and see if anyone knows.
Yes, we must discover these
Oh,
things.
Lulu wants to go to the car show tomorrow night.
Lula wants the car show?
Yeah, she wants to go see the car.
All right, very
Oh,
cool.
wow. Oh my gosh. That's right after, that's either right before or after the Fins, right?
But I think that's after.
Yeah, okay, so that must be like a 60 or 61 or something like that, right?
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
That was amazing.
Yeah, wow, that's
And the color, look at the drab color.
it's phenomenal. That's a beige rage, Frank.
Isn't that something?
That's a neat. That is beige, right? I mean, that's beige.
I don't think it gets more than beige. But
I mean,
oh my God, it's the color of your shirt.
Oh, there we go. I got it. Wow, it's already.
Oh, thank you. Is that working? Is that good?
Oh, I thought you said it's working for us. Like, oh,
No,
it's okay.
I'm talking about the
It's okay. Yeah.
talking about the mic.
Well, 25 years.
That's right.
It's not going anywhere.
That is the proof of the pudding. That's called success. That's called success. All right, we're rolling. All right, so now I have a terrible joke since we're talking about male and female relationships, you know. This is a joke that Dave will like. So I'm I'm trying to deflect the the reaction onto him.
Oh, the peanut gallery.
He's making me tell this joke. So okay. Now put your wife and your dog in the trunk of your car. Close it up. Drive around for about 30 minutes. When you open the trunk, which one's happy to see you? There's a spot in the lower realms reserved for me. Yeah, it's true.
5 ants rented an apartment with 5 other ants. Now they're 10 ants.
Tenants. I like. Rogo likes that.
I'm always just so English. Anyway, keep language as a joke. Like I love that the Beatles weren't spelled Beatles, it's beat soul.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Belly.
Right.
Yeah, it's just kind of neat.
All right. We're still in the midst of chapter 11 of Geshe Nowan Darge's book, Tibetan Tradition of Mental Development. And you will notice that this is the chapter on bodhicitta, which is the longest. And I wonder why that is. Truly, bodhicitta is amazing. I mean, it's just this wonderful blessing of having both the conventional and the absolute teachings. So too bodhicitta. There's absolute bodhicitta, which is abiding, you might say, in the nature of the mind, from moment to moment to moment, momentless to momentless moment. But then there's conventional or relative bodhicitta, which is burst aspirational, the desire to liberate all beings, establish them all in Buddhahood, and then engaging conventional or relative bodhicitta, which is taking a step towards that. So the six perfections, the practices of the perfections, the six perfections are engaging relative bodhicitta, taking us to the perfection of wisdom. So this is really, important. Yeah. Doctor was doing this too. Subject two, really didn't even say bodhicitta. It said bodhi mind, which is a translation of bodhicitta. Basically, yeah. And there really wasn't any emphasis on it. So I really hadn't had any of these teachings. But of course, Nagarjuna says we come to the absolute by means of the conventional. I mean, Buddhism is so profound because it's just one truth, you might say. But that elevates, if you think about it, these conventional teachings. They are the true nature of mind, but in a way that we can recognize right now with our deluded mind. So this is just really extremely wonderful. You don't have to go somewhere and become something different or have some tremendous realization, and before that you're just a schlub. It's not like that at all. We are actually practicing Buddha's teachings. And he didn't give lower teachings and higher teachings. He just gave, one taste. But people have different sensitivities, different capacities, different levels of realization, different levels of faith. It said that when the Buddha taught, people with different languages could hear him teaching in their language. It's that perfect. But so the conventional teachings are, what can you say, extremely important. And yet they tend to get sloughed over somewhat with a lot of popular, and especially Western Buddhism. That's why I see some of the difficulties with Western Dharma centers, for instance, because basically we don't have the idea of merit. When you hear the teachings on realization, then how do we come to realization? By the accumulation of merit, by the accumulation of wisdom, and by direct recognition. Guru Yoga, blending your mind with the enlightened mind of the Lama. So this is very helpful. Because we don't have this idea of accumulation of merit. And I think that kind of explains kind of the struggles of Western Buddhist centers as opposed to Asian Buddhist centers. If you notice in America, Gaura Pache's students that have ethnic sanghas, basically, whether they're Vietnamese, whether they're Chinese, whether they're Taiwanese, whether they're Tibetan, they have this idea. I mean, it's culturally inculcated, of course, of merit. There's some benefit to them for participating in a Dharma center. But in the NGs, the Western Americans, it's not like that at all. We tend to have a more really narcissistic kind of viewpoint of all these things. Well, I can practice at a center. Maybe I don't have to. I can practice on my own. They don't realize the tremendous benefit if you're supporting anything that is affecting so many people. And also as an example, there's so much for us to learn. And I can say from my own experience with, in Western Buddhist Center, there was a lot that you didn't learn. And this is actually kind of sad, because the idea that we can somehow skip over relative bodhicitta and just come to some sort of enlightened state, and that's all there is to it, and that's the highest, and therefore I'm good. It's like that. It just completely misses the point and the profundity of it. The Buddha's time, he attained that highest state of the viharas, the temples of Brahma. Neither perception nor non-perception. To an uneducated mind, that can seem like the great liberation, but it's not. You can stay there for eons, it said. And somehow he had enough wisdom from his previous lifetimes that he recognized that this was not enough. It was not it. I think he had such tremendous aspiration for what? For bodhicitta. He was looking for the end of suffering, and he wasn't going to be fooled or tricked or bought off for some lower benefit like remaining in bliss for 1 billion years. The purity of his aspiration is what has led to 2,600 years of Buddhism, even when it's stumbling around. So this accumulation of merit, I mean, we have this idea, in our own cultural ways. I mean, I just drove by some sort of evangelical church today, and it looked, first of all, it was kind of bizarre because it looked like brand spanking new, looks that way anyway, but it looked like a big flying saucer had landed. I mean, it was unusual architecture. But you see this with the Christian churches. They have this idea that this is a benefit. I'm doing this for others out of love. I'm going to plug into that. I'm doing it for myself and my family and everything. But the idea of coming together to do that, there's a recognition of that. But maybe it's just that Buddhism is new and we're uneducated in it. And also, Americans have a way of kind of glomming onto something for their own purposes. You've heard me joke about, I read about some, what was it, naked fight yoga in Hollywood or something. There's always something going on. These things just get kind of corrupted. And that's no slam against Hatha yoga, but it's just what Americans do. We take something, we get really excited about it. And then, it sort of becomes part of the woodwork, but it doesn't really have a driving force to it. I was kind of saddened today. I was hearing about people trying to organize some activities, and they were concerned that the word dharma is strange, so you don't want to use that with the population, rather than use something like mindfulness. It's like we're trying to trick people into something. And I always think it's like, you have a tremendous disease. Somehow you happen to come across a doctor who says, I have this medicine. This medicine will cure your disease completely. And it's one thing for the patient to say, well, I don't know that medicine and I can't pronounce it and I don't have really confidence it's going to work. That's one thing for the patient. But for the doctor to say, you know what, I'm not going to give this to you because it's kind of hard to pronounce. And besides, there's this other one that you won't have any kind of questioning about. It won't cure the thing completely, but you'll feel better for a little bit. And we call it aspirin, So we can't shy away from the fact. In Pata Rinpoche's, the Kunzang Jamilang Lung, this precious human birth, it's rare. The precious human birth is rare, and equally rare is the number of people who somehow have a connection with the Buddha, even though they have this precious human life. He said it was like taking a handful of dried peas and throwing them on the side of a barn. The number of peas that stick, it's rare. And I realize, as time goes on, kind of my own kind of mistaken idea and enthusiasm. You come across the Dharma and there can be such a sense of liberation and so wonderful. And you see yourself of somehow coming out of this, this angst and this struggle and this deep underlying feeling that really you're just sort of condemned. And to realize there's a path, there's tremendous feeling. It says in the long prayer to be reborn in Dewa Chen, it's like a vulture coming out of a net. That, and so you feel that, and you having come, you see yourself, your own shortcomings, and your own natural humility there, and you see if something like this can dawn in your mind. Well, it can in anybody's mind, and that's true. But we don't see the confusion of samsara. We don't see the incredible power of the ego clinging. And in a sense, you're not really recognizing the tremendous blessings that you've had by having, apparently random contacts with great teachers. It wasn't anything sought after, except in a very deep way, unrecognized, you might say. So there's a kind of humility when you realize, I know someone went to Rinpoche once when there were some troubles here and was all upset and said, Rinpoche, people are leaving the Dharma Center. They're upset about stuff. They're leaving. And Rinpoche just said, people will do what people do. Here's this man who's liberating all. That's what he does. That's his only desire. And yet, skillful. You don't do where you can't do. Sometimes people have to work through their own things. And it's certainly that way with Dharma. So when we came across this book, the Tibetan Tradition of Mental Development, is way back early when we came across the Tibetans, it was just so stunning to me, the detail on bodhicitta and the kind of the purity of the teachings and the fact that it can be relied on. This is the thing. You see someone, these are the levels of faith, but you see a teacher and you're impressed by his or her qualities, and you say, gee, I'd like to have some of that too. How do I do that? And so that's this natural kind of progression. And no one has to sell you with anything. It's your own experience. So, the teacher will say, well, do this, do that, do this, study this. And that kind of confidence gives you confidence, that kind of certainty, you might say, validity. It's always open and experiential, you might say, but at the same time, there's knowing, and then there's knowing that you know, and there's valid knowing. Khenpo Sherabodzer would say, I think he was kind of struck by this kind of fault in American Buddhism where, all sorts of people are excited about Dzogchen, rightfully they should be, but to the exclusion of bodhicitta. This is a huge mistake. You're not practicing Dzogchen. But nonetheless, with academic knowledge only and reading in books and talking to each other and getting sort of inspiration from people who are kind of like half-baked, there's plenty of room for errors, all which will be corrected if people are sincere and just keep going. But Khenpo Sherabodzer would say, yeah, Dzogchen, that's very easy. You just have your mouth open and you stare up at the sky. For me, I can do that, but I can't do bodhicitta. It's very hard. What I like about it, though, is that it's completely relatable. It's not doing the sophistry of having some sort of, esoteric word that people don't know the meaning of. And therefore you can kind of hide in other people's ignorance and hiding in your own ignorance. Whereas with bodhicitta, my goodness, first of all, just to consider all beings as having been your mother, all the earthworms, all the flies, all of that, you see again and again and again how limited our thinking is. And then what are we seeing? We see how it's all just filtering through this attachment to self. We just want to solidify the self, and we want to push away the fears, always keeping this self inviolate. But even that urge, if you go a step deeper, it shows you there's even wisdom there. We're trying to make something solid that isn't solid. So the fact that we recognize unconsciously that it's not solid, why do we need to make something solid if it's solid to begin with? So we have this feeling that it's not. It's this basic uncertainty that we have. I mean, it is amazing. You look around with, say, the tremendous wealth that some people have. And yet they're all out there fighting and struggling, and this one thing and the other thing, thrown off by some insult. I mean, you realize it's not the answer. So bodhicitta, they're spending so much on this chapter, and why? It's not mistaken. The Dalai Lama is not being politically correct when he says that Shantideva's Entering the Bodhisattva Path is his favorite book. It's just tremendous wisdom and help there. It's immediately relatable. You know, you can read those texts and are even 37 Bodhisattva practices. Of course, some of them seem, you know, kind of remarkable, but it shows you where you're not at. And that gives an immediate kind of humility. And what is humility? Humility is opening your heart. Instead of grabbing onto some concept or something that you think is yours, that you relate to, and closing around it so nobody can't touch it, we're just so completely upside down in our ordinary kind of um, graspings. And so this is also helpful because it's so relatable, it's so profound, it's so human, it's so here right now. Really wonderful. And of course, we can rely on it. But to me, the idea that there is a path is just mind-bogglingly wonderful. Instead of that sense that you're lost and there's just no way out, it changes things. It changes things 100%. It's like if you're in Mammoth Cave, completely dark, even the smallest spark changes the nature of that cave. There is light. And so too with us. We make mistakes in our practice, of course, because we're dealing in a dualistic state. We're dealing with less than full wisdom, but there's something that we can rely on. And even when we attach to it, that's a mistake. But this is self-perfecting. This is the path that's been laid out for all these years, century after century after century after century, because it works. You know, it's so interesting that in science and in whatever sociology, anything, you know, people regard the latest book as being the most correct or the one that you should pay the most attention to. But in spiritual matters, it's different. You know, it's like the old book has stood the test of time. And like the Dalai Lama said, yes, we have these 5 great afflictions, these kleshas. He says if scientists shows that there are 6, we would believe that. It's just a matter of getting it done. So it's not getting hung up in all this stuff and the symbolism or anything. But what is the experience? What is the meaning of all of this? So there we go. So bodhicitta, I think we're on page 101, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's called the 3 scopes. So he starts out with this teaching of, you know, someone whose motivation is just a better future. And the second one who wants just removal of suffering. And the third one, yeah, the liberation of all. Okay. I think we're on page 100, actually it is. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. The attainment of bodhicitta itself may confer great powers. One of the Ganden Tripas, a succession of lamas who act as representatives for Je Tsongkhapa. So the head lama in the Gelug is the Ganden Tripa. Ganden is Tibetan for Tushta, the heaven of the Buddha's previous birth. So he was born from Tushita to a human being. And I think his mother, when she passed away, was reborn in Tushita heaven. So Ganden in Tibetan. In Ganden Monastery, his famous monastery, we drove by it when we were in Tibet. And so Tsongkhapa was the founder of the Gelug. And then the succession. So the Dalai Lamas are actually second in command, so to speak, which I always get a kind of a kick out of that, as people, you know, assume. Nonetheless, one of the Ganden Tripas, a succession of lamas who act as representatives for Je Tsongkhapa, turned back a flood outside Lhasa, wholly by the power of his bodhicitta. With bodhicitta, one is protected and able to achieve any goal with no obstacles. There were once 3 meditators in Tibet, all of them seeking Buddhahood in this life. One had developed bodhicitta, and the earth spirits could give him nothing. To the second, they gave a pen, and he became a great poet. To the third, they gave a bag of medicine. He became a skilled doctor. Only the one with bodhicitta was left with an unobstructed path to enlightenment. Let all your efforts be directed here, for bodhicitta must be attained while still on the first of the 5 paths towards enlightenment. So there we go, the 5 paths, the path of accumulation, the path of application, the path of insight, the path of meditation, and then last one is Buddhahood itself. Only mental merit is gained through contemplation on emptiness. But bodhicitta balances this with physical merit. The possibility of attaining Buddhahood in this life depends on one's development of bodhicitta, and that is why Buddhist Tantra is unique. Simply hearing about bodhicitta leaves a great impression on one's stream of consciousness, much more so if one actually develops it. Make bodhicitta the framework of your practice. Shantideva wrote, if you stir milk, its essence butter appears. Likewise, if you stir all the teachings, the development of bodhicitta appears. So hence the value of these teachings, because as you weed through them, contemplate them, try to understand them, repeat them, get them again and again and again, you start to see the interrelationships, and basically things start to dawn, even just a conceptual way. The Japanese say, if you don't know a book, read it 100 times. And there's wisdom in that. There's wisdom in that, rather than quickly, adopting some concept and then thinking that you've done it. The source of happiness on all levels, from arhatship down, is the direct and indirect teaching of the Buddhas, and the source is compassion. All the Buddhas have first been bodhisattvas, and this will be the way of all future Buddhas. So, the great protector of Dzogchen, Ekajati, she has one eye and one breast. Ekayana, the one way. See, Buddhists believe in a one way, not in the way that sounds to us. We think that's kind of a sectarian kind of thing to say. We want to think that everything's equal, no matter what you're doing. That's just fine. But Buddhism teaches cause and effect. Different causes have different effects. And we're also in a situation where we're in this world of appearances where everything is conditioned by other things. Everything is empty. Nothing, even on this level, nothing exists on its own, absolutely. But as a result of its conditions, and all the conditions, various conditions manifesting at the same time, color, form, taste, all these different things. And you can kind of see that if you truly want to understand this conditioned world, you can't just be relying on other conditions trying to explain conditions. You need something deeper or higher, depending how you want to think of it. And that is realization. This is the depth of the ocean. Then you see the waves on the surface, in fact, even that they're on a surface in its proper way. So you have a proper understanding, a valid, correct understanding of all of these waves on the ocean. And therefore, you're not trying to build a house out of a wave. You're not having one wave smash into another one for no stupid reason. You're seeing things as they are and not at a battle, because there isn't some imaginary ego there that you're trying to make conquer the world. So this is all very profound stuff, but it's all completely practical at the same time. All Buddhas were first bodhisattvas. And how does one become a bodhisattva? Not other than by practicing bodhicitta. Just before his death, Atisha said, "Those people in the future should not regret not meeting me. My essence is the practice of bodhicitta, and when one is developing this, it's the same as meeting me." Unquote. Begin every morning with contemplation and equanimity, and follow this with the other steps towards bodhicitta. Become well acquainted with them. These steps are the practice found to be the most effective by Atisha rather. Another method of attaining bodhicitta is given by Manjushri in the words of Shantideva. Its essence is the cherishing of others before oneself. At first, very few people received this oral tradition, and they were required to meditate on it 3 times each day. One reason this teaching was kept relatively secret was that it should be taught only to those of high intelligence and broad mental scope. It is very difficult and is thus only given to those with great desire to receive such a special teaching. There are different methods of developing bodhicitta. Previous explained 6 steps form the common path, and this latter method of manjushri, meaning to treat with equanimity oneself and others, is the more exclusive and effective. So again, those 6 steps we had referred to, it's in our text too, obviously, where you consider the tremendous sacrifice and debt of gratitude that you have to your mother, going through the pregnancy, giving birth, going through all the pain and difficulties, training the child, keeping the child alive. I mean, all of it. This tremendous merit and tremendous accumulation of gratitude that's necessary. And then, you think about that, and you think about then how all beings have been your mother. You have that debt of gratitude to each and every one of them. And then you realize that having a debt of gratitude, you have to pay it back. It's just not right just to sit on it. So it works through steps like that until you finally realize, oh my goodness, in my current state of my clinging and my weak mind, I don't have the ability to save all those mothers. And so this is the leap to bodhicitta. But of course, the Manjushri text that he's talking about here is Tonglen, the exchange of self and others. Through one's motivation, though one's motivation may actually be selfish, one derives enjoyment from saying, I shall do this for the benefit of all living beings. Unquote. Examine what good this self-centeredness has done for you and recognize the truly bad side of the trait. Because of the inborn defilement of self-cherishing, all strife is born. Tension and conflict arise as soon as our self-desires are crossed, and all suffering is due to this self-cherishing. We only need to examine our own life for examples. They need not be listed here. Yeah, so though one's motivation may actually be selfish, one derives enjoyment from saying, I shall do this for the benefit of all living beings. This is the genius of the path, and this shows you that our Buddha nature is shining even in the midst of this clinging that we do. Because it's like a teacher, and it works in the realm of desire with our desire. Our desire for Buddhahood might be completely selfish. It might be, I just want this for myself. But that desire, what does it find out? Well, in order to do that, you have to start thinking about other beings. You have to practice the 6 perfections. When you're doing the simplest kind of giving, there's automatically less than 100% clinging because you're having to give something that you value away. And it might be done in a very shallow way, but it's still happening. So it's still a crack in that, kryptonite bubble that we put around ourselves. So this is the genius. Even in the midst of this realm of desire, there's a way to Buddhahood. Shantideva wrote, look to the Buddhas and others who have reached high attainments and look at self-cherishing and see where it has brought you, unquote. The self-cherishing attitude eats up one's potential powers for spiritual attainment like a worm in your intestines. Change the object of cherishing. Let yourself become less important and make others more so. You can use your cherishing. We're just changing the objects. This is why devotion is so completely helpful. I mean, even to put your hands together like this, again, it's just putting a crack in all this to make one bow, even though it's insincere, even though you're surrounded by other people and you're just wanting to look good, it's still fundamentally different. It's that spark in the cave. Because other than that, you wouldn't be doing it at all. And because of cause and effect, every cause has an effect. It doesn't go away. Always be the loser, never the winner. Kadampa Geshe Langri Tangpa, who composed the 8 verses of Training the Mind, once saw a line in a small book, quote, "Whenever in an argument, lose. Whenever there's profit to be gained, let others have it," unquote. After reading this, he sought further teachings on the subject and subsequently studied for 9 years with the Lama who had written the line. This Lama told him, quote, "You need this mental attitude, whether it pleases you or not." And of course, it's so paradoxical because this is a victory immediately. You know, if you're not doing this hell-bent leather of trying to win, well, you've already won. People want to win because they want to have the peace and the feeling of conquest and the feeling of safety and all of these good things. But if you drop that, you already have all of that. Again, our true nature is shining. But additionally, it's so skillful because you can cherish. You don't have to give up your desire at all, but you're just changing the object of desire. And the paradoxical thing, if someone is giving the victory to others, they tend to be loved. And they tend to actually succeed at something by not trying to cling on to it. I mean, there are always immediate exceptions, of course, but isn't it true? It's really amazing. We're all seeking what we already have. After fully realizing the negative aspects of self-cherishing and the advantages of cherishing others, practice Tonglen, giving all your merit to others and taking all the sufferings of others upon yourself. First, visualize a black spot in the center of your body representing selfishness. And when inhaling, imagine taking in all the sufferings of the world, all of them converging upon and destroying that black spot. When exhaling, send out your virtue and merit to all sentient beings for the sake of their happiness. This is a great method for increasing your own merit. When one is very competent in this practice, it is possible to transfer another's suffering to oneself, providing there's a close karmic relationship between the two beings. Both the meditator and the other being must have committed a virtuous act together in some lifetime, both of them having the desire to take on the sufferings of others. Once, while the yogi known as the Compassionate One, Jampa Naljor, was giving a discourse, someone nearby hit a dog with a stone. The yogi cried out in pain, and a bruise appeared on his body. The dog had been relieved of its suffering. The main object of Tonglen, however, is not to relieve another individual of his suffering immediately, but rather to attain bodhicitta. Likewise, the greatest blessing of the Buddhas is not their power to relieve individual suffering, but the giving of the Dharma. This puts things in perspective too. We obsess about these immediate kind of benefits. You know, it strikes me again, I hear people talking about one thing or another, and it's like the whole world is like, well, not the whole world, but there's so much of the virtuous things in the world are chopping at the branches of suffering. That's what we're trying to do. But the Dharma is cutting at the root of suffering. And it can often be misunderstood. You know, there was a Zen master who's very strict practice. And there was something happening, some retreat, I can't remember what it was. But nonetheless, he got message that his mother was dying and, you know, distance away in the village. And he wouldn't go and see her. And all the monks just immediately broke out into tears. They were just devastated by this. They couldn't understand it. Now, of course, this depends on the degree of realization of someone. He was certainly in a spot where he could help his mother no matter where he was. But this worldly desire compared to the desire for bodhicitta is lesser. It's very hard because we're judged, and we in this world of appearances, the world of other people judging us, these things can be very difficult. But again, when you have this very sincere dissatisfaction with this unenlightened life, and when you discover the Dharma, it's like, what are the options? You don't really have any options because one is so much greater than the other. One is promising the release from all suffering and further Buddhahood. And one is going to take care of maybe some temporary dissatisfaction, which is just going to come up again and again and again, depending on the karma. We're dealing with the roots of the karma. The practice is the greatest means, this practice, for collecting merit. During each meditation, one comes closer to Buddhahood without even realizing it. If at first it is difficult to imagine taking all the sufferings of the world upon yourself, imagine taking on just your own suffering, which you will experience tomorrow. As you progress, imagine in one meditation period, taking on all the sufferings of your whole life, then the suffering of a small group of people, and further expand your scope. At first, this seems very difficult, but after one becomes acquainted with the practice, it's easy. You can be sure that this will be a direct cause of attaining Buddhahood and that there's no other way. When beginning the practice of Tonglen, do not do it with your breathing, but rather use only your imagination. First, imagine taking on all the suffering of others, then send away your virtues and happiness. Likewise, for a person whose body is on fire, you would not first offer them a piece of candy, but would put out the fire and then give them something pleasing. In the full meditation, take on the suffering of all beings from the lowest hell to the 10th bodhisattva level, but exclude the Buddhas and your own guru. The 10th level bodhisattvas have no suffering, but as they still have instinctive kleshas, relieve them of those. When accepting suffering, visualize a sharp black line piercing your black spot of selfishness and utterly destroying it. The main enemy of bodhisattvas is self-cherishing, and it is at this that the anger of the wrathful deities is directed, self-cherishing. When practiced, the visualization will decrease self-cherishing. One bodhisattva said, quote, I show my side in attack and defense to all kleshas, and my front in compassion to all sentient beings. Unquote. If you perform this meditation thinking it will not work, it will not be effective. But if you have trust in it, it will be very beneficial. Signs of success are a feeling of heaviness in the area of your heart and a feeling of fear during the meditation. When accepting suffering, imagine the misery of the 6 realms coming to you and destroying your selfishness. However, this may be difficult at first, and since you have no experience of the other realms, in this case, it may be more effective to sit by a sick person and imagine taking on his suffering. When practicing the second part of this meditation, imagine sending your body, wealth, and virtuous actions to others. Transform your body into rain or cool air for those in the hot hells, and into a warm breeze for those in the cold hells. Imagine giving your body so that others may attain the human body, giving it as food to the pretas, the hungry ghosts, and giving it to animals in the form of wisdom, because they're ignorant. Because humans are greedy, transform your body into all things that fulfill people's desires. For the anti-gods, who are always at war, transform your body into armor. For the devas, into objects of the 5 sense desires. And finally, to the Buddhas and your gurus, you may transform your body into offerings. For all of these, imagine giving your body and wealth of the present and future, but not of the past, and give your virtue of all 3 times. Important scriptures on the Tonglen practice are can't read it in Tibetan with the transliteration, by Shantideva, and the 2 sutras. Can't read those either, sorry. After attaining confidence in the Tonglen practice using just your imagination, do it with your breathing as well. Then you will not waste your breathing throughout the day. Tsongkhapa's disciple Kyadrup commented that if even your breathing is used to develop bodhicitta, all your actions will naturally follow suit. This is the theory. Now it needs to be put into practice in your daily life. You cannot expect to attain a goal in a few weeks or a month. Shakyamuni attained enlightenment through perseverance. He did not start out perfect. It will be helpful to read verses on bodhicitta, either your own or those of others, before meditating. The following lines were widely used by meditators in Tibet. Quote, therefore, having recognized the fruitlessness of self-cherishing and the great benefits of cherishing others, I request the adhistanta, the blessing and power of my compassionate guru, enabling me to bring all living beings to permanent joy by means of my practice of sending all my virtues and happiness to others. May all sufferings, obstacles, and defilements of all motherly beings fall upon me this very moment. Most verses in Tibetan have only 4 lines, but this one has 5, giving added emphasis to the importance of Tonglen. Reciting this verse is like a preliminary practice to developing bodhicitta, and some meditators have recited it 100,000 times. All right, I think we'll stop there today because this is, profound stuff. And yeah, really wonderful. Really wonderful. Okay, anybody?
So the suggestion really was, Frank, that I need to, every time I'm reading in suffering of others and giving them all my happiness all day long.
Yeah.
Campbell was right. I only have like 50,000 lifetimes left.
It can happen in an instant. I mean, as you know, I have this feeling that we're in a degenerate age where people don't even recognize their own teachings or their own cultures that they have. Of course, Buddhism is beyond culture. Talking to someone Sunday, it really was amazing. She had some knowledge of how things had, she had some stories she found somewhere. I'll have to ask her about it again. Alexandria. So you have Alexander the Great, right? Conquers all the way from Greece into India and then leaves this. He never lost a battle. Can you imagine? I don't know how you do that. Some very amazing stories and some of the victories that he had, fighting forces 10 times as great as his. Just this very bold kind of and confidence that before this one great battle that he won, which basically conquered Persia, which was the great rival kingdom. The Persians had been attacking Greece, but at any rate, he slept until noon. They knew the battle was going to be the next day, and finally, one of his main generals woke him up and said, "What are you doing? You're sleeping at the table. We got troubles." And he said, "Yes, when I finally realized what we were going to do today, all my anxiety went away. So I had a very good sleep." And that's Dharma. That's Dharma. I mean, instead of being totally lost, it's like, oh, here's this big book. I don't know it. I haven't read it. But somebody out there knows to teach me how to do these practices. So there's something that can be done, and there's an immediately release of this kind of, that tuning fork in our breastbone that's always vibrating. What can go wrong any moment? Isn't that how it is?
What a great quote. Thanks, Frank. That was great.
Yeah, you're entirely welcome. And in talking to this woman, I recommended a paper to her that I had read. I'll have to read it maybe tomorrow or Sunday. Kempla's not here. The profundity of these in our own culture, these traditional theistic teachers. I mean, they're all misinterpreted. It sounds so arrogant for someone like me to say that, but it's not Frank's arrogance. It's just having a little understanding of the Dharma and applying it to what they said. I mean, for instance, forgive me for going off on a tangent here, but with the Protestant Revolution, right? One of the great figures was Calvin, who was this kind of dictator who controlled Geneva. And he was the one that had this idea of predestination, that basically everybody's going to hell except for a few people who are the elect, but you couldn't tell who they were. So everybody started acting as if they were. And some people think that's the generation of modern capitalism, as far as working hard but not spending anything, saving money and accumulation of capital. Who knows? Who knows these things? But nonetheless, Calvin taught that we were going to hell, that basically everybody was going to hell. And he got those. These were his interpretations of the teachings of St. Augustine. Now, if you read Augustine going way back, he's like in the 300s or something. The City of God. Yeah, there's an order, the Augustines. Yeah, yeah. And you read that book, it's just this wonderful kind of thing because, he was like wrestling, he became a scholar, he became a philosopher, and then he got into some cult basically, but he was like the Buddha, he was just continually disappointed by his teachers and kept going farther and farther. And so he finally became Christian, and he wanted to be a monk. He eventually became a monk and a great bishop and a great theologian, but he wanted to, give up the worldly life. And so he said he found himself in the street saying, Lord, uh, let me give up self-cherishing. Let me give up sex, but not yet. So I love that book because he's so honest. Well, the misinterpretation, he said that all of us are in hell right now. Calvin took that to mean that all of us are going to hell. But Augustine is so much more profound. We're in hell right now when we are apart from the sources of love and compassion. When we're just dealing with all of our stuff, but not something, the root of it, you might say, or something that isn't subject to conditioning, therefore something that's infinite in time and space. So these old guys and girls had some very powerful insights. But with time, everything, degenerates and where it goes. But nonetheless, it just it made me think how fortunate we are because this is so close to the source. Some of these termas, the hidden teachings, I mean, they've been discovered. Guru Rinpoche gave the transmission, hid these texts either in the mind or in water or in rocks to be discovered at a later time by these great treasure finders. So they find something. It hasn't gone through 2,000 years of misuse, so to speak. The energy of it is rather pure, therefore more powerful. So think of all of us. When I think of Gar Rinpoche, born in a traditional society and the way they practiced, unbelievable. I get that feeling from the Tibetan doctor in private talks with him. He's talking about Amdo, where he comes from, the great Repkong Lamas. Lama Tarchin was a Repkong Lama. We're that close. It's just truly a miracle that we're all being blessed in this way. I just feel so fortunate. Without it, I don't really think there'd be much hope. Looking at myself. Okay, let's do the dedication, which I think we'll use what we just read. Having recognized the fruitlessness of self-cherishing and the great benefits of cherishing others, I request the blessings and power of my compassionate Guru, enabling me to bring all living beings to permanent joy by means of my practice of sending all my virtue and happiness to others. May all sufferings, obstacles, and defilements of all the motherly beings fall upon me this very moment, and may every last one be free. Svaha. Okay.
It's interesting.